What can we learn from the fantasy football running back scoring from the 2021 season? It's time to find it right here and right now as we break it down for you on Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. We're getting you ready there for Super Bowl 56, so we're tabling a little bit here on Locked On Fantasy Football. We're going to get into it next week there in detail for you, all the way through the game breakdown, the prop bets, DFS, all that good stuff there leading into the game. So we'll go full bore into that game and our last opportunity to play fantasy football here until the 2022 regular season. But we're going to look back to the 2021 regular season once again here. Look at the fantasy football scoring leaders. Go in order there at running back. We already did our review of quarterback there, going pretty deep. We're going to do the same thing here at running back. Go very deep here for you. We're going to go through all the QB or RB1s and RB2s. And then we're going to look down the line and look at the flex type players there. So all the way from RB1 down to RB36. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. And this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by GetUpside. Just download the free GetUpside app and use the promo code TOUCHDOWN to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. All right, we'll dive right into the running backs. It probably won't surprise you who the number one running back was. So we'll do this first. We'll go through the RB1s, RB2s, and then the guys that fell out of that range and where they were in terms of flex plays all the way through RB36. So let's start with the top 12. Number one, Jonathan Taylor. We know this. He was the Sporting News Offensive Player of the Year, named by his fellow players. So everyone respected what Jonathan Taylor did. Led the league in touchdowns from scrimmage, yards from scrimmage, rushing yards, rushing attempts. He was a workhorse, delivered big time in fantasy football. We didn't know how things were going to break down, and it didn't look great early with Frank Reich, but it got going there when they kind of phased out Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins, and Marlon Mack was inactive. They finally embraced Jonathan Taylor as a full-bore workhorse. And we saw that not too deep into the season to have those big numbers. But once he got rolling, he was a 100-yard and touchdown machine. He was kind of old school, like we've seen with Marshall Faulk or Sean Alexander, LaDainian Tomlinson, Priest Holmes, some of their big years that they've had in fantasy football. Jonathan Taylor was that. He was above and beyond the best producer there. He was durable. He doesn't miss practices. He doesn't miss games. And he just delivers. So he's in his prime. Jonathan Taylor is going to be the top quarter running back on the board here for sure in 2022. Definitely way ahead of all the other quarterbacks here that you look at. We mentioned Josh Allen being a possibility as a first rounder from quarterback. Well, Taylor is going to be the first overall on the board. There's no doubt about it. Everything lines up for him. He's the full load guy there for the Colts. No doubt about it. He has a good offensive line. Even with Carson Wentz struggling at quarterback, Jonathan Taylor was very effective. So, again, run heavy. The Colts are not going to change that identity, even with losing last two off seasons, Nick Sirianni and Matt Eberflus. They're going to still stick with that here with Frank Reich. So, Jonathan Taylor in a good spot there. Austin Ekeler, we said he was a terrific value if you could get him the back end of the RB1, so that 9 to 12 range. Well, turned out to be true. He was ultra durable here. That was a question mark a lot of people had. How would he fit in the Joe Lombardi offense, number one? And then number two, would he stay on the field? He's had some durability issues, hamstring. He's a smaller back. Those guys typically don't profile as workhorses to handle feature loads and stay healthy through the whole thing. But there's no doubt that Austin Ekeler was a stud here. So very consistent when he was out there on the field. We saw just one game late there with Justin Jackson that he had to fill in big time. But Ekeler, otherwise, a very strong asset. Joe Lombardi, good parallel to the Alvin Kamara. We thought he was a good value. He absolutely was a steal. So we were actually lower on Taylor because a lot of the situations didn't play out for JT until during the season. Ekeler, a lot of signs pointed to him having a breakout year overall. We know he's been very valuable in fantasy football before, but to ascend to RB2, we're not worrying about him in the PPR specific. He scores consistently. So when you have backs that get high volume and extremely talented and a big focal point of what their offenses do, you're going to get the production. That's what we saw with Austin Ekeler. We were also not sure about Joe Mixon because we knew about Samaje Perine. We knew about Chris Evans. Was Joe Mixon going to have a lesser role here? Kind of like Taylor. But no, the Bengals went forward with Joe Mixon, giving him a heavy workload here. He stayed healthy, and he played well off the passing game in Joe Burrow. The offense overall was just improved. So a lot more scoring opportunities for Mixon there with touchdowns and just being consistently involved with his receiving and running in a lot of games. And the Bengals were also good enough where they could play with leads. So everything kind of lined up well for Mixon. Part of the Bengals surprise season, we saw Joe Burrow finish as a QB1. Jamar Chase up there among the wide receivers. We'll talk about them and break down that scoring. But yeah, the Bengals overall, one of the biggest surprises we've seen in the NFL in a long time. Mixon only a mild surprise because we would say we still had him as an RB1, but to ascend this far into upper echelon territory, pretty special for Mixon after he's shown promise of that for many seasons, but it finally happened here. And it'll continue here with Joe Burrow. So Ekeler and Mixon and Taylor all in good positions to keep producing big time. So is Nadia Harris. We'll get to Damian Harris. He's also in our top 12, jumping that. But Nadia Harris is number 4 here that we're looking at. And look, it was a struggle to run the ball. The Steelers could not block all that well. The rookie had a lot of promise from Alabama, but again, he had to kind of grind to it with scoring and receptions. They just kept feeding him the ball, though. That's what matters. Volume is king, especially if you're talented enough. And I would say definitely Najee Harris fits that bill. So he expected our expectations as a rookie feature back here in Pittsburgh. But that's been their strength. They give the ball to one back quite a bit and load him up. And we saw the results from Najee Harris, even though there were some games where it was disappointing. They were just giving him too many touches and too many key touches near the red zone in the passing game to ignore that he was going to produce. And that's what he did as the RB4 on the board. And that continues. So young upside, that's what we're looking for with running backs. And those guys, especially Taylor and Harris, really have it here in the NFL. James Conner, speaking of Steelers workhorses, remember he was a big-time Steeler in his production there, taking over from Le'Veon Bell. Then they moved to Harris here, let Conner go in free agency. Has a big year with the Cardinals, but very touchdown dependent. Chase Edmonds was in there getting the touches as well. But you look at James Conner, he was a scoring machine there. They didn't really throw the ball that much into the end zone. Kyler Murray didn't run it. So it all lined up for James Conner to be the closer in the Cardinals offense here. So hard to duplicate. He's a guy with injury issues, we know, that have developed from Pittsburgh, had a few at the end of the season in Arizona. So those are the concerns with Conner. I just don't think he'll duplicate it with the touchdowns. He was just scoring at too high of a rate. I don't think that happens again. So I think he's the first guy we look at here in the top 5 of the running backs that's going to drop off. So is Ezekiel Elliott. This will shock people that Ezekiel Elliott finishes RB6. Remember how we were complaining about Ezekiel Elliott? He's not looking good. He's not running the ball enough. He's got the knee injury. He's not all that effective. Tony Pollard looks better. Well, Elliott at least kept playing and grinding, and he finished as RB6. So it wasn't maybe spectacular as RB6. It was pretty steady and no like massive games here for Ezekiel Elliott the way we're used to in the past, to splitting with Tony Pollard. The Cowboys becoming a little more pass happier with Dak Prescott. But again, he's out there consistently getting the touches week in and week out. And that says a lot. Availability is a number one ability here. And Elliott has always been that throughout his career. It doesn't matter if there's been setbacks with injuries. And he was definitely slowed down. But again, volume, opportunity, and just health are key here in running back and just to crack into the RB1 status. Next up at number 7 is Nick Chubb of the Browns. He looked really good, I think, and part of it is Kareem Hunt was hurt this year. Last year, Chubb was the one hurt. Hunt had a bump up in his value. Hunt's value really plummeted here as Chubb was fed the ball quite a bit. They had Dearness Johnson in there as well, and Chubb missed some time there in the middle of the season. But to finish this high is pretty impressive. Chubb is just a special talent for Cleveland. So still a lot of upside here for Chubb. We'll see what they do with Kareem Hunt. They can move on, and that would help Chubb's value as well. They were using Chubb quite a bit in the passing game as well, and he's still the lifeblood of what they do in Cleveland. Still, the passing game is questionable, but Nick Chubb is solid RB1. We thought he was going to do a little bit more, but given the share, I think that's pretty impressive there at RB7. So we got ahead of ourselves on this other Alabama Harris, Damian, but he finishes at number 8. And that's pretty impressive, too. He had a lot of touchdowns, a lot of big games here as they were rush dependent here for the Patriots, letting up Mac Jones and letting him get comfortable here. So Damian Harris, a big year, but Ramondre Stevenson still had some pretty good value here. So we'll talk about that in our final segment. But they trusted Damian Harris. He was a big-time rusher. Didn't cross over to receive as much as we thought, with Stevenson being the change of pace, but still very effective. The Patriots run heavy, good offensive line there to support Jones, and Harris pounded away and got the consistent scoring opportunities as well there for the Patriots. Next up, it's a name that we thought we would have talked about already. It's Alvin Kamara. He's number 9, so he falls down quite a bit. Remember where Alvin Kamara was being taken. He was taken right behind Christian McCaffrey, so pretty interesting that he had Christian McCaffrey 1, Alvin Kamara 2. McCaffrey gets hurt, falls way off the radar here, and didn't really produce what you wanted. So you get Kamara. It was disappointing for sure to drop about 7 spots where you thought you were going to be scoring from. So he couldn't quite stay fully healthy, but they were also hurt by the offensive limitations elsewhere, figuring out quarterback. They had a bit of a shuffle there with the injuries. Didn't really have reliable wide receivers. So Kamara, you had Mark Ingram get some action in the middle of the season. So Kamara, we knew there was going to be a bit of a regression here, but to jump from number 2 down to number 9, I think he'll bounce back up more, be in the firm RB1 early in the top 6. That's where I would say Alvin Kamara is. So is the next guy on the list, Antonio Gibson. I thought he had a bit much higher upside. He ended up going exactly where he should have been on as the RB10 there. So I thought he was going to have a big rise like Ekeler. I thought he was going to possibly be where Eckler's spot was, but still very pleasantly surprised that he finished in the top 10, and he missed some time. He also played through a shin injury. So keep all that in mind. He was rather healthy. This offense didn't always help him with the touches in key situations. They try to work in J.D. McKissick in there. So pretty good accomplishment for Antonio Gibson to finish there in the top 10. Next is Leonard Fournette. He had a great season for the Buccaneers as a free agent, so we'll see if he returns to be there. But Fournette, very good value, really pulled away from Ronald Jones. Giovanni Bernard was not a factor. So one of the great league winners you could have gotten there without investing high in a running back. So is the next guy. A lot of people picked him up off the waiver wire after week 1. Cordarrelle Patterson of the Falcons. Yeah, Cordarrelle Patterson, one of the most consistent fantasy producers all season long. He also had the crossover wide receiver eligibility. So in some leagues, you could have played him. You could have played a third RB1 in some leagues in your lineups, and that would have been Patterson at wide receiver as your wide receiver 1. So big time production here from Patterson. Didn't see this coming all the way here from the Falcons. They teased at it that he would have a role behind Mike Davis. Turned out he was the guy ahead of Mike Davis in a lot of key situations there for them. So Fournette and Patterson, definitely the big surprises here, as well as Connor ascending all the way up to number 5 with his touchdown dependency. All right, we'll get into our next 24 running backs. We'll hit 13 to 24 and then 25 through 36 in our next 2 segments. We told you at the top, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by GetUpside. Well, hey, fantasy football fans, this is Vinnie Iyer with an incredible app for everyone who buys gas you need to know about. It is called GetUpside. My listeners are earning cash back for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free GetUpside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use the promo code TOUCHDOWN for 25 cents per gallon or more on your first fill up. That's all in cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using GetUpside. Just download the app for free and use the promo code TOUCHDOWN for 25 cents per gallon or more on your first tank. Some people drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a year to cash back, and there's no catch. The cash back gets right there added to your account. You can cash back out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or need gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free GetUpside app and use the promo code Touchdown to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. That's Touchdown only at GetUpside. All right, thanks so much for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. It is Super Week coming up, brought to you by GetUpside, and there's no better place for coverage of the big game than Locked On NFL podcast. Locked On NFL, Locked On Bengals, and Locked On Rams will all be in LA all week covering the big game. So will I there for sporting news and crossing over to Locked On Fantasy Football. So excited about that. On location, great stuff there from the Locked On Network, from the Bengals Rams in Los Angeles. All right, let's get into our next wave of running backs we'll talk about. These guys fell out of RB1 and fell into RB2. Aaron Jones, this was a bit of a fall too. He was right up there with Kamara, getting drafted pretty highly, but Aaron Jones falls into RB13. We know a big part of it is A.J. Dillon. Spoiler alert, he's coming up in this segment as well. So they made it more of a split with Jones and Dillon. They're not a surprise. They really like Dillon there in Green Bay. Second-round pick, Boston College, ran really well, was a good power back, but also showed that he could be a bit of a receiver. So a little bit more of a committee. So that was pleasantly surprising to see Jones still finish as RB13, but definitely you overdrafted him and you took him in the top 6. Derrick Henry, it's just fault of injuries. I mean, if you look at his production, he was going to be right there with Jonathan Taylor battling for the RB1 spot. So a little bit concerned. It's a foot injury going into next year. He didn't look all that effective in the playoff game when he returned against the Bengals. So we'll see how it plays out here for Derrick Henry, but he's had a lot of wear and tear. We'll see if he can continue that. And he finally broke down here in 2021. Dalvin Cook, another high guy you drafted there in the top 5 there. You might have drafted him second behind Christian McCaffrey if you're debating between him and Alvin Kamara. He finishes way down here at RB 13 to 15. Really surprising here. Jones, Henry, Cook, all these guys were pretty high first-round draft picks. So 15 for Dalvin Cook. Part of it is he missed time with injury. Part of it is the Vikings offense wasn't as proficient in scoring consistently. And you had Alexander Madison cut into his role a little bit as well. And the Vikings tend to throw a lot in the red zone. So Cook can bounce back here with the new coaching staff now featuring Kevin O'Connell as the Vikings head coach. Josh Jacobs is next, so he almost breaks into the top 15. He's number 16 on the board. Slow start for Jacobs. Didn't get his 100-yard games until late in the season, but still a pretty special back, getting most of the touches. You didn't see a lot of Jalen Richard or Peyton Barber cut into his work too much. Gets it done with volume, and they've always been on the fence on giving Jacobs the ball here. I think it did improve when John Gruden was no longer in the mix there for Las Vegas. The next two, we'll take them as a package deal here as we get to RB17 and RB18. Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams, they could not be separated. They turned into both being very valuable RB2s. We were hoping that one thing would happen where Melvin Gordon would be on the shelf and Williams could accelerate up to RB1 status. Didn't quite happen, but it will happen here in 2022. Gordon is a free agent. I don't expect them to bring him back with the Broncos or the new coaching staff with Nathaniel Hackett. So I would expect Javonte Williams to have more of a regular feature role here. So Williams going to shoot up with a bullet into the potential top 12 and be on there, maybe into the top 6. Well, I think Gordon is going to be looking for a new spot to land here, and I don't think it's going to work out as well as it did in Denver. All right, our next running back here as we look at it is number 19, Devin Singletary. He popped up here. Didn't look good for a Bills back to crack this list between him and Zach Moss and Matt Breida, but Singletary really took over the backfield down the stretch. The last 5-6 weeks of the season really vaulted him here into solid RB2 status. He jumped ahead of David Montgomery of the Bears, and this is a bit surprising. Montgomery also is banged up a little bit. He had Damian Williams and Khalil Herbert step in, but Montgomery missing time, still part of his resume here. So going forward, we'll see. Matt Eberflus, the new head coach, should trust Montgomery more as a workhorse. So I see him getting a bump up as well if healthy. A.J. Dillon, we mentioned that he was around, and he's at number 21. So 13 for Aaron Jones. Dillon also gets an RB2 status at number 21 in standard. So really looking at two Packers backs with a lot of value. We'll see what happens here with Aaron Rodgers. They did lose Nathaniel Hackett there. But you still have Matt LaFleur going to keep it up with these two backs, really getting a good workload and very effective running team. That's why you're able to field two RB2s in Green Bay. Next is Daryl Williams. Daryl with 1L from the Chiefs. Yeah, this might surprise some people. He gets it at number 22. Clyde Edwards-Helaire wasn't healthy for much of the season. They didn't get Jerick McKinnon until late, and he wasn't healthy either. So Daryl Williams had to take control of this backfield. We saw a little bit of Derek Gore, but no Damian Williams. And he was the best replacement. They put him in power situations and passing situations. So this is not going to last here. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that shows you that he has very strong RB2 status if he can stay on the field here and catch a few more passes there in those third down situations for the Chiefs. DeAndre Swift missed a lot of time, and he still comes in as an RB1 here at number 20, or an RB2 at 23. I think he would have been an RB1 had he had stayed healthy. He was splitting time with Jamal Williams, but Jamal Williams' role really kind of faded. We saw those other guys get in there, Gordon Igwe-Bike and the other backs they trotted out in Detroit while Swift was on the shelf. But this is pretty remarkable that Swift missed all that time and still was able to get up here. So really good sign here for Swift and shooting way up in 2022. Elijah Mitchell comes in at number 24. He's the last RB2 on the board. What a big year for Mitchell as a runner. Was unheralded there as the fifth-round pick. Trey Sermon got all the buzz. He had Raheem Mostert. When Mostert went down, Jeff Wilson couldn't stay healthy. Sermon couldn't stay healthy. Mitchell already had the job over Sermon early in the season when Mostert went down. Mitchell was banged up a little bit with an elbow and a knee and a shoulder, but he came back and really produced well. So he should start the season as the 49ers' best choice at running back, I think, over the veterans and any other options they could add in the draft for Sermon at this point in 2022. All right, we will break down the running backs 25 through 36, the ones that were the most disappointing there in our final segment for you. So first, we got to tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. So football continues its march through the playoffs, right through the big game next week. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just football. BetOnline is up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates and on current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline, where the game starts. This is also an episode brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it is impossible to stock all the parts you need in any chain store. Why endure often pointless, seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store car dealership? Example, you can get a Honda Odyssey fuel pump at $353 from a chain store, but you can get it for only $216 from Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Every price you find at rockauto.com, reliably low for every customer. They have everything you could find and need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today at rockauto.com to find the easy solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car, truck. Right, Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box so they know that we sent you? Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Find them at rockauto.com. All right, time to close the show looking at the final running backs here that I have on the board. These are the scoring leaders in standard here from 2021. See what we can learn about them for 2022. Coming in at number 25, James Robinson of the Jaguars. Robinson wasn't even supposed to have the biggest role that he had. He looked good, but then he had the injury late in the season. The Jaguars kind of dragged them down with the anemic offense with Urban Meyer and Darrell Bevel. Trevor Lawrence wasn't putting him in scoring position much, so tough break for James Robinson, but it's going to be tougher next year with Travis Etienne coming back. So major injury for Robinson, Etienne coming back from his injury, new coaching staff. All these things do not point well for Robinson to keep his role from the first 2 seasons of his career. So unfortunately, I don't think it's going to get better for him. You have also Daryl Henderson coming in as an RB3 flex. He was doing a good job here, but he got hurt for the Rams when they lost Cam Akers early in the season. Funny enough, Sonny Michel is the next running back on the list there at number 27. So, yeah, so Henderson, Michel, about equal with their production filling in for Akers. We know Akers has returned, and he'll be the guy there. So both of these guys' value probably disappearing here for 2022 unless Akers gets hurt again. Myles Gaskin, yeah, he was very stuffed. We thought he could be an RB2. He ends up well into RB3 territory. Yeah, we're not trusting Dolphins backfield until we have a bona fide answer that isn't Duke Johnson. Tony Pollard, again, cut enough to Ezekiel Elliott's work to bring down Elliott from maybe being in the top 5, but Elliott still finished in the top 6. Tony Pollard, I think his production was a little bit overblown here in 2022, but that could change definitely as Elliott wears down a little bit and Pollard shows fresh legs and more explosiveness here. A little bit of changing of the guard that's probably coming there. Michael Carter should have a bigger role for the Jets. He was hurt for much of the year, hurt late, hurt for most of the season early with the ankle. So he was definitely their workhorse and their key guy when he was in there. So Michael Carter also a bullet upward here. Rashad Penny, we'll see. They declined his option with the Seahawks, but he catapulted into relevance here late with his workhorse work. He won a lot of leagues here, but again, Chris Carson could return. They could look at a different direction running back, and Penny may not be back, period. So something to watch there. Devonta Freeman is not going to be on this list either. He was only in there to take over the backfield in Baltimore with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards hurt. So still not a lot. He had to contend with Latavius Murray there, who was well out of the RB3 conversation here, and Le'Veon Bell for a short period of time. So, yeah, hopefully next year we'll get J.K. Dobbins as an RB1 and Gus Edwards as an RB2, respectively, there out of this backfield. Ramondre Stevenson getting in there at number 33. Again, didn't cut into Harris as much as we thought. He was battling some injuries himself, but should see a bigger role in year 2. Chase Edmonds, we'll see. He's a free agent as well as Connor, so Edmonds can stay healthy. Connor really was vaulted by that as well. It was pretty much an even split when Edmonds and Connor were both healthy. So Edmonds and Connor were both healthy. So we'll see if the Cardinals start fresh in the backfield or pick one or the other to go forward with, and they would have big value here. Clyde Edwards-Helaire comes in at number 35. We know how effective Daryl Williams was as an RB2, so he should go up. And Mike Davis actually came in at 36. This should surprise some people. That's on top of Cordarrelle Patterson finishing at number 12 at running back as the last RB1. So Mike Davis, Cordarrelle is a free agent. Mike Davis didn't do all that much coming over from the Panthers, so we'll see what happens here with his backfield. They could go in a different direction altogether with a young workhorse that they draft in the 2022 draft. All right, so there you have it. There's a look at your running back scoring review from 2021. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Now make your second listen Locked On Bets, our gambling expert show hosted by your boy Q, featuring the analysis of Lee Sterling. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer. Every day, and we'll be back to close the week looking at our wide receiver scoring review for 2021 for our Friday show.